Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, profiler here, and welcome. It's been a while. We're so glad to have you back. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be doing this today. Although it's very sad, it's a very sad case. I mean, we're going to be talking about Bobby Crimo and, the slaughter that took place in Highland Park, the Highland Park Parade in Chicago. And we're going to try to dissect as much as we can today on what was going on with this guy and his imagery. We have Dustin Rank here today, who has been on before. A lot of you really like Dustin. Dustin is the best there is at deciphering a lot of this imagery stuff. And he's going to be stepping up to the plate today. He's a master tattoo artist. If you want to check out some of his work, go to Black Feather Designs. Black Feather Designs. Leah will put up a link for you, and you can check out his work. Very, very talented, a real master of his business. And Dustin, thank you so much for coming today. Really.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me again. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend. And what we're also going to be going over today is, this rage and anger that was in this guy, which was in Bobby, and caused him to explode. I wrote a book 20 years ago. I talked about, I did a chapter on school violence and talked about this, heading this way in this direction. And, really, in the last 20 years, think about, since I wrote the book, how many school shootings and how many mass murders we've seen in the last 20 years with younger people, just killing their peers and kind of anybody else they felt like it at the time that was around. So anyway, today we're going to be looking at this, and what we're going to give you today is something special. All of law enforcement out there is looking for the motive. Why did he do it? Why did he do it? Well, I'm going to give you my take on his motive today. Okay, and I want to see what they come back with, because I truly believe, okay, that we've discovered the motive. We know what the motive is, and I think you're going to find it very, very interesting. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and here we go. So, Dustin, let's start with you. What do you think? What do you have to say to the audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me back, John. It's always great to be here with you on the channel. We always got some great discussions going on back and forth, before we do these things and while we're doing these things. So it's a real pleasure. My pleasure. So yeah, it's been interesting when we first started talking about this, when this happened, John, that, and as we were just talking, man, like his online persona, like, bam, like it ghosted fast. I mean, there was and is currently very little out there visually, or from his, everything that he had pretty much is gone. Mm-hmm. So we're left with kind of grabbing pieces wherever we can. And, a lot of times because as we were talking, like, since I'm visual, I'll pull up multiple sources of things, and I'll just kind of sit with it for a while, and I'll filter through it, and I'll start to look for repetitive, imagery or patterns that this guy might be using, that he might be drawn to, things like that, and of course, he had a pretty interesting kind of little online career going, for himself. I mean, my son does music too, and I get that, and I respect that a lot, putting forth the effort and putting yourself out there. Anytime that you're a artist or you're creating stuff, that's a pretty vulnerable spot to be in, regardless of what kind of content or music or art you're creating. So I'm seeing this kid for the first time, and man, I mean, The dude looks like a kid, right? Like, I mean, he's only 22. So he's a youngin', man. I mean, he does not have a lot of, he just doesn't have a lot of life that he's lived, but he's got this real, I mean, you can tell he's got this real heavy image that he's trying to create, and when you look at a kid that's 22 years old with, that isn't already a self-made millionaire or, a music star or whatever, like, at the end of the day, he's still just kind of a regular kid. But, you start like getting real heavy tattoo work and you getting tattooed on the face. Man, I've seen that take a lot of guys out, because you already feel, as an artist, you are kind of a vulnerable person anyway, even if you got this tough guy shit going on. I mean, because you got to bring that stuff out, right? You got to dig into your heart, you got to dig in, and you got to find the words, and you got to find the music, and you got to find the imagery to say all that stuff. So you have to really open your filter a lot, and that can put you in a, there's a lot that comes with that, especially at a young age. I mean, I know it was for me for sure, having to, just didn't have the life tools to manage like all that intense stuff kind of coming through your system there, and you're trying to put it out and see how people react to it. But it looked like he had a pretty good following. But like, man, I'm looking at this dude, and the first thing that struck me, obviously, because you can't miss it, it's one of the only things is his facial tattoos. But makes me wonder, like who in the hell's tattooing a 21-year-old kid's face? I mean, sure, you can get some of that stuff done, just about any neighborhood that you walk into. There's always some, we call them scratchers, they're willing to do cheap work and probably not very healthy, probably isn't very good. And they certainly don't have a lot of, they don't really, they're not there to really give a shit about you. They're just there to make a couple of bucks or whatever. And as a tattoo artist, obviously for 35 years, like that would have been something we never, ever did. I mean, if we were gonna, I mean, even hands too. I mean, and that would still, if I was still active, that would still be the case. Like, I wouldn't give a shit if you are some YouTube rap star, like you're 21 years old, man. Like, I'm not tattooing your hands. Like, I'm not saying it's inherently wrong, but when you take the totality, let's say you do 1,000 of those tattoos on people over the course of a year, right? There's going to be about, probably 980 of them that are going to regret the hell out of it, or it's going to cause them some sort of life problem in terms of getting a job, or maybe their career path changes or whatever. Like, I mean, even as stable as my career was for, all those years, I mean, it changed in kind of a heartbeat. And I was an older guy at the time. So, I had some resources and the tools to switch gears, but, when you're 20 years old, 21, 22, and you think you're kind of locked into this for life, like, you don't realize that, man, there's going to be some day, man, might need to pay the bills, you might need to think about what you're doing. But, as a responsibility as a tattoo artist is to, sure, you want to give people what they want, obviously, because you're there for them. It's not necessarily, excuse me, it's not necessarily your project, but you do have to have the responsibility. You do have to look out for your clients and your customers and your friends in that business by not putting them into a situation that could potentially be really limiting to them. And it has this, it can have a huge psychological effect too. I've seen a lot of kids kill themselves that have had a lot of face tattoos. And for a long time, and I don't know if it's still going on, but here in Oregon, there was an outfit that was, offering for free, to remove that stuff for a lot of, the homeless kids and the kids in the gang life so that they could get a fresh start. Cause like, once you go there, man, like, you're locked in. Like,
I have to bring that up to you because it was so interesting when you talked about that. It really grabbed me, on how many you were talking about. You got the facial tattoos,
yeah,
had emotional problems, and there were a good number of them that became suicidal. And exactly that's what we have here. Okay.
Yeah.
Bobby, my boy, had suicidal ideations, thoughts of suicide that he was expressing. Now, a lot of people have said, "Oh, yeah, it was a suicide attempt." That is not a suicide attempt. A suicide attempt is he would have pulled out a knife, tried to cut his wrist, took a gun, put it to his head. No, none of that. he talked about committing suicide, which a lot of people may not know is not against the law. Of course, if somebody's in that kind of distress, you want to get them to a safer place, get them to do an intervention, get them some counseling, get them to a psych unit, but they have to be willing to go. Just because they're thinking about suicide or even expressing it verbally is not considered an attempt, okay? It's considered an expression, they're talking about it, and it's all an accumulation of suicidal ideations. I mean, that's what we listed under, but they have thoughts of committing suicide. Now, whether that, you know, is one of this guy's ploys to get what he wants or whatever, because I'm looking at a child that grew up in a very, based on the information that's come out in the news, in a very abusive home life, very dysfunctional home life, and also a child that could have been spoiled and enabled, because, you know, when they came back to the cops were called to the house again for him. This time they could have arrested him for terroristic threats because he, you know, threatened his family with so many knives. I don't know, he had up to knives that he said he was going to kill everybody with. If the family did press charges, he would have been arrested. He would have went off to a psych unit, would have been evaluated, would have gotten some kind of treatment. And there's a good possibility, a really good possibility, would not have ended up on a roof with a rifle sniping people, okay, and becoming a mass murderer. But the family enabled him. They poo-pooed it to the cops. They said, oh, he wouldn't do it, or whatever. How that went down, I don't know. So we see enabling there. Then we hear enabling, okay, about the gun, okay, that the father signed off on the gun to help him get the rifle. Well, who in their right mind would help their child get a rifle if he's just threatened to kill the whole family and he's talked about committing suicide, okay? And he's talked about, you know, how dark and depressed he's feeling, okay? I mean, what parent in their right mind would go out and co-sign a child like this?
Yeah, right.
Co-sign a rifle for a child like this, okay? So, you know, there's a lot going on here clinically about his, you know, pathology, his emotional pathology, psychopathology. I mean, this is a very sick, damaged, but yet in a way enabled and spoiled young man, okay, with absolutely no empathy for others. And this is going to come into the motive when we talk about it. But please continue. I had to elaborate on what you brought up, so important about the kids you've seen kill themselves, okay, and be suicidal from getting facial tats. Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that dovetails right into it. I have never seen a young person that was, you know, feeling good about themselves, or, you know, feel like that they were on track, like go that far with getting ink. You know, there's always something kind of underlying there, you know, whether it's, I mean, I'm not a clinician, so I couldn't really speak on it, but you sense it, you know, and it's your responsibility, obviously, as an artist to just say no to that stuff. It's, you know, the tattoo imagery itself, as we've talked, especially around gangs and cliques and stuff like that, you know, these young guys, they start badging up with this stuff. And I mean, it's a lot of psychological weight to start rolling around with, especially if, you know, you're like this kid that's just making music in his room, you know, he's probably feeling pretty isolated and maybe depressed. He's obviously not feeling too good about himself and all this other stuff. And here he is, like, I mean, this guy's doubled and tripled down on this image that he's trying to create, I think, for his music business, to get the attention, to get, you know, to have some sort of like street credibility without really haven't done the work, if that makes sense. I mean, typically when you see guys like from prison and on the streets or in a tattoo shop, when they're wearing that kind of stuff, man, I mean, those guys are business, you know, they're not messing around, and they've been putting in work sometimes for decades, and sometimes they're still active. You know, they are not messing around. So when I see some kid that's just making music videos and going all the way in, it's like, wow, my initial reaction is just like, man, that's just not going to end well. You know, might not be today, but somewhere between now and if you make it to my age, you're going to have some problems, buddy. I mean, it's just, it really doesn't sit well with me that some other tattoo artists just won't take that into account, because I think it's super irresponsible. But, you know, we're looking at that, obviously the thing that grabs most people. I mean, you see the awake tattoo on his face, which kind of ties into his message and his music thing, Awake the Rapper, which, you know, okay, it's a horrible place to get a tattoo for just a regular guy. But, you know, everybody's talking about this 47, and we're never going to really know what it means unless he says what it means, because as an artist, you can ascribe a meaning, you can appropriate imagery, and you see it all the time, and you change its meaning around, you tweak it and stuff. But you know, that style and that where it's placed in numbers typically come from the streets. They typically come from the prisons. It could be the block that you live on, you know, 47th Street. It could be a code, you know, those numbers could have alphanumeric reference to something. You know, it could be 47, it could be 74. You know, people like to move things back and forth and juxtapose them against other stuff to create whatever meaning that they want. So we don't really know what it means for him unless he says. But, you know, you can tell that he's lifting that imagery straight out of, you know, that's what you see in prison. You know, you see, you know, the street level soldiers, you know, that are putting in work, like getting stuff like that all the time. Not necessarily on their face, but like numbers play a really important role in tattoo imagery for a million reasons. But, and then, you know, he's kind of got this stitch thing, you know, like I honestly don't know what he's thinking when he's doing that. I mean, my take on it when I see that is, you know, he's just trying to look like a badass. You know, he's looking like he took one to the eye, you know, which obviously he didn't, you know, like he's got some scars and shit. And I'm just like, buddy, you're just not, you know, it's okay to, you know, like get stuff that's kind of a little bit out there, but it's just like, dude, you know, you haven't been around enough to be looking like that, you know, like he doesn't look older than my kid, you know what I mean? It's
What's
like, I don't think
really,
you're taking enough hard shots in your life to fool anybody here.
what's really interesting that you brought out is the attention seeking. You see, this is
Yeah,
this is part and parcel of his motive too. And it's
sure.
interesting you hit on that, okay? Because that's what this kid was doing. Okay, he was a wannabe. All right, he
Mm-hmm.
was a wannabe. He wanted attention. He wanted his music to be out there. He wanted to be super famous. He wanted to be loved. And it wasn't happening. And he
Yeah.
couldn't deal with it. He couldn't deal with it. This is a part of it. This is this rage and this anger
Mm-hmm.
building up. And lots of times you'll see this in spoiled kids where, you know, yeah, maybe there was abuse on one side, but then spoiled on the other, you know, two different
Sure.
extremes. All right.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
you see this every now and then.
Yeah.
And that kind of kid wants, you know, hey, how come I'm not getting this attention? How come I'm not a success? How come people aren't, you know, going wild over me and over my songs and my lyrics
Mm-hmm.
and everything? Okay. And the reason for that is because you're not as good as you think you are. You're a legend in your own mind.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're just becoming enraged because even though what's interesting here, even though he grew up in this dysfunctional, abusive household that they're claiming, okay, that they're claiming, with alcoholism and everything else and being locked in a hot car and stuff like that. This is what's out there in the news. But and even though he told his family, I'm going to kill everybody. I'm going to kill everybody here. Okay, that's his anger at his family. So he's verbally expressing it, right? But in the end, this guy doesn't kill his family. Okay, this guy doesn't kill his family. This guy strikes out at society. His beef is with society. Okay, so why is that? Why is he taking out his rage, murderous rage, on society, on people? 99.9% of them he probably doesn't even know, and lives in the community with them. See, this is the other side that we have to look at here. Okay, this guy didn't discriminate. Okay, if you were out there in that parade, if you were young, he would kill you, which he did. If you were elderly, he would kill you, which he did. Okay, if you were in between young, a child, and an elderly senior citizen, if you were in between in age, okay, middle age, whatever, teen, he'd kill you. He didn't discriminate. This guy just wanted to hurt society. So my question is, why? What did society do to you? Okay, you talked about killing your family. Now we understand, there's a backstory on the family situation. But why society? What did they in general do to you? What are you mad at? What are you mad at the town at? What are you pissed off about as far as society in general goes, right? And you know what it is? And I believe this is his motive: fame. He couldn't get famous. He wanted to be famous no matter what. And you could see it in his drawing. You could see it in his art. It's in his lyrics. Okay, that this guy was going to go out, okay, his destiny. And he even has that written out. If you can find it on there, we will try and put up a link, okay, showing one stick figure getting murdered, and his destiny was to shoot it out. All right, and that's exactly what this guy did. He took it out on society, and it's probably because he did not achieve the fame, and he blamed society for not accepting him. They didn't recognize him. He didn't feel famous, and it's all because he didn't get enough attention from them for his music and his lyrics and his tats and everything he's done as Awake the Rapper. I really believe that. Now I'm going to tell you, and folks, I want you to understand, this is not the first time that we've seen something like this. Years ago, we had another singer-songwriter, another person who killed a number of people, and he killed them by proxy. He didn't do it himself, but he had people do it for him because he felt he was such a great singer and such a great songwriter, and he felt that he deserved to be recognized, and he went completely off the charts, okay, and went completely crazy when he was not recognized, and he realized that he was going nowhere, and he got rebuffed and rejected by some different record companies, different labels, different producers. And remember, rejection is another form of abandonment. Okay, and a lot of people don't understand that. His name was Charles Manson. Charles Manson didn't kill people by his own hand. He had other people go out and do it for him. Okay, although they do say there may be one or two that nobody knows about that he killed. But the point I'm trying to make is he felt he deserved fame. He was the best thing since sliced bread when it came to being a songwriter and singing, okay? And he took it out on just people that he didn't even really know. Some he knew, but some he didn't have any connection at all. Sent texts and the girls out, had his own cult, had them brainwashed. In fact, one of them, Squeaky Fromm, even took a shot at Carter, tried to assassinate President Carter, because that's the kind of hold that Manson had on him. But what the similarity between Manson and this guy is that they wanted more attention. They felt and blamed society for not being successful. And Manson, along with feeling a producer or two along the way, didn't help him out.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to bring that out as far as the attention goes. Go ahead, finish.
No, that's a great point. It kind of ties perfectly in with a little paragraph that I have in my notes here of, here you got this kid that's, troubled, and he's got some, behavioral issues, obviously. And now he's got all this tattoos, that are highly visible. And that's the thing too. I'll jump back to this, but you can kind of tell right out of the gate how, like this kind of hard ass image that he's trying to project just doesn't really align at all with, you look at him, he looks like he's 12, he doesn't look like a street kid at all. I'm not saying that, the trauma he experienced or whatever isn't real. I'm saying, dude, that guy's got about as much in common with like a gangster's, a carton of milk. He's got nothing in common there. So he's over consuming, this hard, heavy lyrics and about death and depression and taking himself out, and this imagery of himself getting shot, this self-fulfilling prophecy, and all that overconsumption. John, in a sense, it's kind of like a drug, and it just starts leading to like the lack of self-care. I've seen it a million times, where people get so engrossed, they start getting more and more depressed. And see these people through the tattoo shop, obviously, through the business. And you see them successively, week after week or month after month, and they just, they start declining, just like a drug addict. They're just getting more and more, they're deeper and deeper into whatever their world is that they've created, because people aren't responding to it. They're not feeling legitimized by the stuff that they're trying to express, and it just starts digging a deep hole for them that they just can't get out of. And especially with the younger kids, and going back to the suicide, but which is totally part of it. They're just so consumed with what they're doing, and it's so misdirected. Like there's no cohesiveness to their songs and their image or their artwork or the words that they're trying to express, that people don't get it sometimes, or they think it's weird, or they think it's different or silly or whatever they think, but they're just not getting, excuse me, they're not getting that reinforcement that they're looking for. And consequently, they just feel worse and worse and worse about themselves. And, nowadays, like you said, like we're seeing these people just get so far down the rabbit hole and so self-absorbed, and, with all this, it's just fuel to a fire, and they erupt,
That's right. They erupt, they explode. And
yeah.
Exploded.
Yeah. And, unlike a lot of the gang guys and the outlaws that I've dealt with over the years, which, it sounds kind of ironic to call them like good people, because they weren't doing good things, obviously, but, they grew up in that life. And, so rolling out and doing heavy stuff was not, it wasn't like an explosion thing for them. That was like, that just like their reality, and so you just didn't see that with those guys in terms of like this explosive rage. They were already angry, and they were just angry all the time. They were hard. They were living on the streets, or they're living in, whatever, group of, their social groups or their gang or their club or whatever they're doing. So they had that just constant reinforcement. And they never had to like really sit down and think about anything that they were doing. It was as normal as you and I getting up to make breakfast or something. It's really a weird thing to see, how somebody can sit in your chair, and just be like the chattiest dude or lady ever, and like come across really respectfully, and they pay good and they tip good, but man, they're going to roll right out of there, and they're going to go dust some guy standing on the corner, I
The
mean, it's like,
life, it's the life. You get into the life and you get addicted to the life, and
yeah,
you love the life, and no matter what life it is, that's in that ballpark,
yeah.
it doesn't love you back.
It doesn't love you back. I mean, and so you see this Crimo kid, which is,
Doesn't love you back.
it's so rough just to kind of look at him, because you're like, he's not a part of that at all. But in his own mind, he thinks that he is. And it's like, whoa, buddy, like, you don't have a clue of what direction you're going with this stuff at all. You're really, that stitch tattoo kind of reminded me of some other stuff too. I'd sent you some information from a couple of sources of, I'm thinking of this kid, and I'm looking at his imagery, I'm looking at his lyrics and reading them, and some of the stuff. And like I said, I'll put things out on a screen, or I'll start writing stuff down and I start looking for patterns that kind of repeat themselves. And, for a nerdy kid that's spending a lot of time in his room and like kind of self-absorbed on the computer or whatever he's doing, I got to believe that this kid has to know about this stuff, because I know about it. That when I started seeing these particular patterns, it started like, like, where in the hell have I seen this before? Because it's not real common unless you're, living that life, or you're in law enforcement and you're working with gangs. But, a lot of that stuff, there was a couple of patterns that I saw that reminded me of gang code. And, he's already got the facial tattoo 47. That is gang code. That's prison code. I mean, I think that he's appropriated that to his life because he thinks it makes him a badass. But I don't think that, because he's not part of a set somewhere. He's not part of some prison gang, obviously. He's not having to like deal with that whatsoever. So seeing some of these other patterns that he's got going on in his artwork and some of his tattoos that we can see, I'd love to see what else is going on there, because obviously he's got more stuff. But there's this prison, it's called a pigeon cipher or a Freemason cipher that uses like a hashtag or a tic-tac-toe sign. They use X's, they use crosshatch, they use a lot of really similar stuff. And I'm not saying that's what he was doing, but when you start to see patterns repeat and you see imagery repeat, as an artist myself, I mean, I have imagery and certain patterns that I use all the time, and I'll tweak them and bend them and move them around and reappropriate them to other things as well. But there's things that I'm drawn to for particular reasons. And I got to believe, because this guy was such a wannabe, John, like, reminds me of, when we talked about Chadwell, what a badass that guy thought he was when he's just a kid raping piece of shit, and I kind of see the same sort of thing going on with this guy trying to like come across that way to people when he clearly isn't. He's just like this nerdy emo kid, which is fine. But this prison code thing was really interesting to me. And there's a whole bunch of stuff online, and you can dig into it and your viewers can dig into it. But I got to believe that maybe he was just kind of appropriating some of that stuff into his artwork, into his tattoos. Was he using it as another form of communication? Because he is a communicator. I mean, he's saying, this is who I am. These are my tattoos. These are my lyrics. This is my online persona. This is my Twitter account, my, pictures of me in my tactical gear, for God's sakes. I mean, I got to believe he knew at least what that stuff was and what it was used for. Was he using it? I honestly don't know. I'm certainly not a cipher expert. But it's just a pattern, an imagery pattern that stood out to me that's pretty deep. You start digging into gang code, man, and it's like, that's a whole other world, man. It's pretty intense.
Well, you're hitting the nail right on the head, because he very, very dark person. It's in all his lyrics. He's trying to be a badass, but yet the guy, when you look at the crime, we have to look at the crime too. He's no dumbbell. He knew what he was doing. He methodically put this together. He knew the parade was taking place. He knew didn't want to be seen, so he was going to try to look like a girl. Mm-hmm. He kind of disguised himself like a girl. He knew where his sniper perch was going to be, how to get up to that position. He climbed the ladder up to the top of that building. He then was able to set up a good position where he had a good view of the whole parade, and then he began to kill people, okay?
Mhm.
So that's very well thought out. Now, at the end of it, you see him do something that is moronic. I mean, you got to be a moron to leave the weapon that you just killed all these people with right there and go back down the ladder that you came up the ladder with the weapon, but now you're not taking the weapon with you when you leave.
Right.
You're leaving the weapon there. That weapon has a serial number on it that is
Mhm.
going to take the cops about 30 seconds to figure out who owns it and to be over at your house waiting for you. Okay. This is
Yeah.
how, so right. So this is, well, why would he do that? If everything else was so smart in the way he handled the crime, the murders, the mass murders, how could he do something so stupid? And I believe it's because somewhere in his mind, he wanted to get caught. And again, I go back to my motive of fame. He wanted to be famous for something so dark, something so bizarre, something so horrific. Okay. And he will be infamous.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he will be infamous. Okay. Long after he's gone, he will
Mhm.
be infamous for what he did. And that's what this nut butt, that's all I could call him, is a nut butt. That's what this guy wanted. Because now he takes off. He's got another weapon in the car. He has plenty of time. They already have his name out. They have his picture out. They have the car he's driving out. Okay. I mean, it happened that quick because he left the weapon there, right? Yeah. So now he has another weapon and he's in Wisconsin. So now he has an opportunity to continue, but he doesn't. See, he doesn't. All right. And then he's pulled over and the cops grab him and everything. But he had the opportunity to kill more people, and he had the opportunity to get rid of himself and kill himself or get, suicide by cop or whatever, however you want to look at it. He had the opportunity to commit suicide like so many mass murderers do. Okay. But he elected not to do it because I think this crazy nutbutt is just focused on enjoying, even if it's in prison.
You bet.
His fame. And as you mentioned, all about the gangs and the prisons and everything. Well, it looks like, Dustin, he got his wish, huh?
Yeah.
Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Big time. Big time. And, it's funny that you mentioned, that Manson tie in there, because I think that's super, super relevant to what, how this kid was approaching stuff. But, who else do we know that was really infamous that shot from a perch and left his gun behind and walked away? Oswald.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most famous, shooters that we know about in the last 50 years. I mean, now there's a bunch of them, obviously, but that guy, you talk about famous or infamous, of course he wanted to get caught, and I don't know, maybe this kid was thinking he had this going all along in his mind that this was going to happen. Because, you get to prison, you look like you're 12 years old, man. You're going to have a rough life, buddy.
Oh, he's going to have a rough life in there. Because don't forget, again, he didn't discriminate.
He didn't discriminate at all.
He killed kids. You know how child killers do in prison.
You bet.
He killed kids. He killed moms. He killed dads. Yeah. He didn't care what color you were, if you were male, female. Yeah. He had no specific victim. This was completely at society. Okay. Yeah. There was not one population that was the primary target for him, Listen, we're going to have to break here. I can't thank you enough, for your expertise and for your time. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed Dustin as much as I did. Again, Black Feather Designs. Check Dustin out at Black Feather Designs. And also, I've got some lyrics here. We'll probably have to do another show on this because really these lyrics are what we call clinically rich. I mean, they are dark. There is a lot of rage. Everything Dustin was talking about with this guy and I was talking about this guy are in these lyrics on all his songs. He's got about 8 songs. Okay, and we'll put some up. We'll put some up for you, and we'll put some links up, and you can take a look at them and see what you think yourself. Because if you're interested in psychoanalyzing a mass murderer, that's kind of putting out all these different warning signs. I mean, these songs in themselves really it can be an education for you. So again, I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much, Dustin. I don't see anything else here that I want to talk about right now. We've given you our take on the motive. Again, fame. He wanted to be famous and infamous, and he will be. He got his wish, and he got his wish about being a hard ass and having a lot of gang and prison tattoos. So he's got his self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Point.
Yeah.
I want to thank, as I said, you, Dustin, but I want to also thank our audience. I mean, they're great. I mean, these guys are great. They love you. We always get great comments from them. And please continue to comment. I want you to watch this. I want you to comment on it. We want your take on this guy. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with Dustin. What's your take on this killer? Okay, what's your take on this killer, this mass murderer, this young mass murderer, and all the different warning signs that were out there, and the statement that he ended up making. So again, thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Can't thank you enough. Please stay safe out there. It is most important. You've got to stay on your toes and keep your eyes open. We've got a lot of serious stuff going on in this country. We have a lot of people that are coming into this country that are called gotaways. Some of these are terrorists. They've arrested, I don't know how many terrorists coming across the border. They're not coming here to show us a good time, okay? They're mingling in with these other poor people that are trying to get in here or whatever. And I'm not going to get into that political stuff, but I'm just telling you, okay, that it's out there and, there's just too much violence going on, and we've got to find a way to stand together, together we stand. Okay, folks, thank you so much. God bless you. Please take care of yourselves again. And until we talk again, just make it a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, John. Thanks for having me back. It's always great to talk to you. And I want to give a shout out to your viewers as well. Their comments and their emails are always really thoughtful, and they're always throwing interesting things my way, and I really appreciate that as well as appreciate you and your time. So thanks again, John. Always great.
Our honor. Thank you.